Oh, the gorgeous lake, sights, trees, everything here. So beautiful in Detroit, Michigan at the Detroit Grand Prix at Belle Isle. And tonight, the Porsche Owners Club, well, they're not going to see most of those sights as they are stuck between some cement walls and plenty of signage on a very narrow and bumpy track here in Motor City. The Detroit Grand Prix circuit will give these drivers all they can handle in the penultimate race of the Porsche Owners Club Sim Racing League. Glad to have you along for the ride tonight live on the Global Sim Racing Channel. I'm Devin Henry. Alongside me in the virtual booth is Joe Peak, and behind the scenes is our director, Sean Ambrose, using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. Well, as these drivers stare at those walls and try not to bounce off them throughout the track, how about you get a closer look at Belle Isle as well with our GSRC lap guy.
Welcome to the Belle Isle Street Circuit. Situated in a beautiful park on Belle Isle itself, it rests in the Detroit River, sandwiched between the Motor City and Canada. With it being in the far north of the Midwestern United States, as you'd expect, harsh winters make this a bone-jarringly bumpy track. It's most known for IndyCar's yearly visit, but has also seen IMSA hold rounds here lately. The 14 narrow corners only add up to a mere 2.3 miles in length, but it can tend to feel like a lot more just from the sheer stress of keeping your car out of the walls. Runoff is non-existent in the majority of corners, so mistakes tend to be punished with race-ending damage. The dangers include the tight and twisty fountain section with its rapid-fire set of bends, and the frightening turns 12 and 13, which end the lap with two swift kinks. However, the most notorious spot on the track is the exit of Turn 2, made famous by collecting the Corvette pace car into its hungry walls one year. The first two turns are a quick chicane, so the extreme change of direction, plus the rise in the track as it crosses over a creek, means grip and balance can disappear in an instant. While the setup of the car can sometimes help lessen the annoyance of the bumps a little, what this place all comes down to is driver skill and daring. Precision will pay off with the close proximity of the barriers. While it isn't a stroll in the park for drivers, fans get to enjoy the beauty of the scenery all while watching some of the most thrilling racing an American street course has to offer.
Nearly 2.5 miles these Porsches will be trying to visit upon, and you get a great view here. Not a ton of elevation changes, not a ton of, room to pass. And Joe, while this is a favorite for the IndyCar world, I don't know, how do these cars with fenders fare at such a narrow track here at the Detroit Grand Prix?
Well, pretty decently is the answer, because IMSA's actually raced here with the RSR. So it's not a car that is completely unfamiliar to this surface, but you talked about it some, that this is a really visually stunning track, and not just because of all the beautiful sights around this park, but because the closeness of the barriers really gives you a sense of speed. Now, the interesting thing is I would actually compare this place, oddly enough, to what we saw in the first season when these when this series had a lot of rovals on the calendar. And the reason is because in those rovals, you saw a lot of drivers outbrake themselves as they try to re-enter the infield. You'll see that in many of these corners where they have escape roads, and if the drivers are smart, they'll try to go up those instead of trying to make the corner, or else, well, you're going to end up with quite a bit of damage. Now, the real worry is going to be on the first lap, where the track can obviously have blockages because of big pileups, so they'll have to be careful and try to give each other respect on those opening laps. But the real big talking point that anybody who ever drives here talks about is the bumps, Devin. It is, well, it's northern Midwest, and anybody who's lived in this area knows that the winters are very harsh, and there's nothing that you can do to keep a racing surface in nice conditions. So it is just hellish trying to keep the car smooth over here. And it's basically an exercise in trying to get a setup that is compliant and fast.
And you can even see almost coming off of pit road there, that area, there's almost a small jump where you will get those rear tires up and the car will want to run around. This is a street course. This is not a racetrack that gets nice and groomed and repaved. No. This is a good old-fashioned, flat, bumpy, narrow street course that these drivers will have to navigate, such as right there when the RSRs and the GT4s began to come together. Well, there is plenty of signage across this entire track, but some of the signage that is not included are some of the great sponsors that help out this series being able to race every other Monday. They include Sunset Mortgage. Don't put your money in the bank, be the bank. Check them out today at sunsetcash.net. And Octavio Tequila. Celebrate now. For a great tasting tequila, go to octaviotequila.com and purchase today. And Century Financial Consultants, making the rest of your life the best of your life. You can check out their website at centuryretire.com. And if you might be interested in advertising with GSRC, you will love our channel's 1 million monthly global impressions. They're just a great way to get your branding seen by a diverse audience in the sim racing community. Follow the link in the description below on YouTube or visit globalsimracingchannel.com/advertising. As I mentioned earlier, this is the penultimate race in the series. Granted, well, the championships are almost all but wrapped up, but there's still wins to be taken. There are still points battles to be finished. First and foremost, in the RSRs, Teddy Framheim taking the win last week at the Charlotte Roval. 8 wins now on the season. Connor Bloom trying to keep up in second. Matt Hollander, even with his bye week last week, sitting right now in third, Joe. And still, there's some battles and points here across these two series.
Yep, and in the GT4s, Jacob Abrams up ahead of everybody by 63 points. And he won the last race at the Roval. Speaking of the Rovals that I mentioned earlier, Connor Bloom came in second. Or excuse me, Connor Bloom came second in the RSRs. Technically correct. But Paul Newton came in second in the GT4s. You can see him second in the points as well. BJ Fulton a little bit closer to Paul than Paul is to Jacob. And then Doug Baccignone a little ways back from him in a nice tight fight for fourth with Michael Ost, who is not doing too bad here in the warm-up as well.
And as these drivers continue to try to tame this track and keep up with all of your favorite drivers here in the Porsche Owners Club by going to gsrc.tv, live timing and scoring, and follow along just like we do up here in the virtual booth. That's at gsrc.tv. So round 15 of 16 here, but there are plenty of niches going on. I absolutely love some of what we have going on in the Porsche Owners Club. So Joe, why don't you take us through, for some of the newbies here, what these drivers face every week?
Absolutely. Well, they've got 30 minutes of qualifying, which they're in the middle of right now. But they've also got a 30-minute race that will take place. So pretty much a sprint race that they'll be experiencing out here, which will put the pressure on to trying to get those overtakes done at a track like this. It is open setup in this series, although from what I understand, what I've last been told, they do provide a setup to the drivers that they think is pretty good. So they can get out there and run. Now, whether or not that is winning pace setup, that is up for debate. And there you can see the two classes that they have to run out here. The RSRs, the GTE class, and the GT4s, which is the K-Men, some of which the drivers in this series actually own and run.
And that's something fun, is that this is a real-world Porsche club. These guys actually go out across most of California. They do wheel-to-wheel racing. They do time trial racing. Then once the pandemic hit, they decided to take this virtual. And so some of these drivers who formerly raced against one another in the physical world in their own personal Porsches now coming and able to more comfortably trade paint, I feel like, in the virtual world instead. Wow, this looks like a real-life Porsche sometimes, the ones that get left outside for a little while here. Jeffrey Schulem riding around right now looking to grab his first timed lap as these drivers continue to find a little bit of pace here and there. Right now, how we have it set up, the RSR class, essentially a GTE class. Excuse me, that is open to all current POC members with an iRating above 1500, or also some pro racing drivers in the class as well, or what you're looking at right now, the Club Sport Caymans and the GT4s. Those are open to any POC members, and so it's very interesting to see some of these races when these drivers get to come out and get into a virtual machine. And here's the president, Ron Palmer, taking some laps as well.
Ron, of course, known for also doing some time on two wheels, racing motorcycles, but does fairly decently on four wheels as well, even in the sim world. Currently sitting in 8th. This is the one in front of him, Michael Johnson. Excuse me, that was 7th in the RSR class, actually. Latvala and Newton as well running with the GT4s. Newton all the way up into 2nd. He's probably tired of that P2, though, considering P2 last week and P2 in the points, so he's got to find about 2/10 to get ahead of Jacob Abrams, and he's still got plenty of time to try and do that.
Yeah, plenty of time. We got a race today and then a race 2 Mondays from now at the Circuit of the Americas. Now, the interesting little kink there is that it will be the longest race of the year. We do usually have a 30-minute sprint races. We had a 60-minute race earlier in the year at Auto Club Speedway, a track that a lot of these drivers are used to in the physical world. But when they head to Coda coming up here in 2 weeks, that will be a 90-minute race. So it will feel a little bit more like a multi-class full Porsche race than these typical 30-minute sprints that we get here. That will be next year live on GSRC.
It's like Chad Duncan coming across, and that one's not going to be quicker for him, and is even having to give way. That's one of the difficulties that they've got in this open qualifying here, Devin, is that with it being open, they've got both classes out at the same time, and they have pretty drastic differences in speed. The fastest lap in our GT4s is at 136. Compare that to Framheim's pole right now, which is a 124. So they're essentially split apart by 12 seconds right now. So you don't get too many clear laps if you've got a lot of cars out running. Right now, we've only got, I think, about 4 or 5 that aren't on track. With 23 cars, that's quite a few that are currently taking up the space on the concrete.
And when you look at this track, there are actually a pretty wide amount of, dare I say, straightaways, but there are some portions where you're not constantly going through S's or V'ing up and down the track. Obviously, it has been troublesome occasionally this year when the RSR is so much faster than the GT4s end up inevitably catching up and lapping those machines. When you come to a track like the Detroit Grand Prix, what do you think we're going to see when inevitably those RSRs do catch up to these Caymans?
They're going to need patience, for sure. And the GT4s are going to have to try and make sure and hold their line and be predictable. That's the big thing that you always hear in multi-class. Be predictable. Don't try and anticipate what the drivers are doing and react to them behind. Just look forward and run your line. And it's the responsibility of the GTEs to try and get by. Johnson this last time not able to go quicker than his 27.0. He's up to 6th place. But yeah, really the trouble spots I anticipate are going to be places like the fountain section where it's extremely narrow and very, very slow. It's hard to try and overtake even lapped cars through there. And then oddly enough, the backstretch is a place of miscommunication. You see, it's not exactly straight despite the name. As it heads along the river, it just kind of weaves back and forth. And again, that's something where the predictability comes into play. If you're one of the GT4s, it's probably better, in that case, completely opposite of what I said before, to actually hold to one side if you can instead of try to follow the natural racing line, because it kind of goes across the track. In that case, it's basically sort of highway rules, essentially. Kind of stick to one lane, stay to that side, and the other car will find their way around.
And this isn't like NASCAR or other single-class racing where when the leader catches up to someone, sometimes they'll be fighting for position. But, I mean, there's cases where an RSR is coming up to a battle for 4th, a battle for 3rd in the GT4 classes. Or we have seen a multitude of times this year where there are 2 drivers battling in the GTE lead, and they're trying to pass the GT4 leaders in their own fight for a battle. And that just makes things even more complicated is when you're trying to pass a battle for a podium position.
Exactly. And that's why I was saying patience is key, because sometimes it will go against you and sometimes it will go for you. You just have to kind of use your discretion as best you can to see what is going to be a safe pass past those drivers, because I expect attrition to play a big part in this, Devin. So if you keep the car whole and keep it pointed forward, I think you're going to get a good result today.
We're coming towards the front straightaway here where the green flag will fly right about there at the start-finish line. We have seen a few tracks this year, though it's mostly tracks that have a very long front straightaway where either a problem happens in RSR or a problem will happen in the GT4 class, and it will take out a large portion or at least multiple drivers in a single class. If something goes wrong on the green flag tonight, there will be mass chaos, and it will come down to who is able to avoid major damage in a crash where an entire straightaway just gets completely clustered.
Yeah, and we even see that in IndyCar. Professionals at the highest level of motorsport find themselves clogging up the track here. I mostly expect it to either happen out of turn 2 or out of turn 3. Those are kind of the notorious spots where cars tend to lose it on the first lap. As we're watching Newton try and complete his here in qualifying, and it doesn't look like he's going to be able to take that pole away, unfortunately. Johnson also not able to make it. Do we have anybody else here? Looks like Latvala, maybe?
Looks like that's going to be about it, as Michael Johnson completed his lap as well. This will be the last driver on track, assuming that netcode doesn't bounce him off the track. But drivers finishing up their laps here, and it looks like actually abort mission there. Lavala will actually head back into the pit. So with that, we will take a look here at your starting lineup at the Detroit Grand Prix for the Porsche Owners Club. On pole, he seems to do it every week. It's Teddy Framheim on the front row, but beside him, a newcomer to the front row of the first group, Michael Ost, who's typically running in the GT4, will run up in second here in GTE. Connor Bloom, he ran actually in GT4 last week. He's back in RSR. He starts third. Michael Bolton qualifies in fourth. Matt Hollander fifth. Michael Johnson will be outside of row 3. Bayan Saleh, he qualifies in 7th, and Robert Stout rounds out your RSR field in the top 4 rows. Your pole sitter for the GT4s is Jacob Abrams once again. Paul Newton will start 10th overall, second in GT4.
We got Doug Baccignone on the inside of the 6th row and in 3rd in his class. BJ Fulton will be next to him in 4th. 5th goes to Jad Duncan, with Jerry Freckleton returning, starting in 14th overall. 7th in his class, Corey Latvala, with Michael Robin starting in 8th. And you've got Aaron Edwards in 9th and Ron Palmer in 10th. Mark Rondeau starts 19th, and John Momeyer is the last one to get a time in, 20th overall. No, excuse me, Adam Fulton managed to get one in there, and he'll start 21st. Shulam and Cicero did not put a time in and will be gridded at the back of their fields.
So we will get at least a little bit of a pace lap here. So before these drivers get rolling off and get to the line, Joe, what is the keys tonight to get a win, whether it be RSR or in the Cayman?
Same thing I've been banging everybody's heads on so far. Patience and keeping the car safe. You do that and you have a decent amount of speed, you're going to get a win. But if you let your head get, if you let the red mist come down on you, you're going to find yourself getting into trouble around here. If you have a spare car, unfortunately, you're not going to be looking at a win. You're going to be looking at trying to salvage a decent finish instead.
Yeah, you do get that all-important fast repair, although when you come to a road course, if you're going to be using a fast repair where there's no full course cautions, you can essentially kiss your race goodbye. So these drivers able to get onto the grid. One last kind of half a look here at the track before they start going here in the Porsche Owners Club. And once again, Teddy Framheim on pole, and that's just been the story of the year as we come into the penultimate race. The championships are everything but locked up, basically. But still plenty to drive for here, Joe, trying to get as high as you can in the points or just win a race. It's bragging rights here. This is a real-life physical world club.
I think the bragging rights at a track like Detroit will be immense, too, because it is such a tough track. If you take a victory here, you will earn some respect among your peers.
Looking for respect, looking not to run into the car in front of you, though, as well. The pace Porsche will peel off into the pit road. Teddy Framheim, Michael Ost leading the field to green. And we are underway at the Detroit Grand Prix at Belle Isle.
Ooh, almost a little bit of a clog. Framheim almost got caught sleeping on the start from the pole. It looks like our GTEs are going to be clean through. The question is, are the GT4s? They're a little bit trickier through that 1-2 S's.
So Framheim will begin this race in the lead. Bloom trying to use that outside on Ost. Ost able to hold him off, though, using that inside. Bloom now trying to cross him back over. Can't quite seem to get it. But, Joe, these drivers right now trying to use those grip strips the best that they can, really punching them through the corners.
Well, we've had our first incident in turn 3. Palmer and Rondeau got into it. Unfortunately, Momeyer collected as well. Everybody else able to get it going.
And then a little bit of issues up front. Ost really getting into it with Bloom, as well as these RSRs going neck and neck. And there goes
sorry, that's
the
Hollander
bell.
off.
whole gathering
Big
of
wreck
RSRs,
there.
which were all hanging around for the most part.
Looked like Bolton got involved,
Bolton.
unfortunately smacked into the tire barrier, Devin.
Looks like Salehi as well. Maybe even Michael Johnson. A major issue here in RSRs, and that's what happens when you come to such a thin track like Detroit. Luckily, though, for most of these front runners in GT4, it didn't seem to affect them much.
I think Ost may have been close to that. I'm not sure, but he has certainly lost a lot of time. He is well back, about a second and a half from Connor Bloom after only one lap. But it's Teddy Framheim who's impressing me. He's over 2.5 seconds over the nearest car, so he is absolutely flying.
Framheim out of the gate, 8 wins this year, was one of the winningest drivers in the first half of the season, now trying to run away from Connor Bloom. Bloom won the season opening race at Daytona, but didn't win until about a month ago. Able to get back on the top step of the podium, but still seemingly chasing after that 106 RSR of Teddy Framheim.
If we could glance at the GT4s, because Newton's actually putting some pressure on Abrams, and Abrams had to go defensive into turn 3, so he's clearly feeling under threat. Now, remember what I mentioned, it's very hard to pass here. You have to pick your spots carefully. If I was Newton and if I found myself having trouble trying to get by Abrams in the braking zones, I'd wait just a couple laps because the GTEs will be coming through, and that could give him a pick.
And you look right now at the top of the field, Abrams, he has 8 wins this year. Newton has found victory lane as well. Boccignone has even found his way to victory. BJ Fulton, though, he's still kind of lurking back there in 4th overall in GT4. He has yet to claim a victory this year, trying to earn that. Right now, he's 3rd overall in points.
Yeah, but he overshot the turn 7 braking zone, unfortunately. And BJ Fulton is now right behind him. He's just behind this pair that we're watching in the lead. There he comes in. That is Boccignone in the bright green car. Fulton falls back a little bit coming out of the fountain section. You really got to be perfect around this track.
And, of course, that's a little bit difficult when you come to a track like this, and that's what they say, that perfect lap is out there somewhere. But, man, when you're racing along with all these cars, it certainly is hard to find. Framheim's lead overall is already up to 4 seconds now. Abrams is just trying to get about a second on Paul Newton, but these drivers, after really being bunched up for the first about lap or so, finally starting to separate here.
Man, BJ was getting so close to the back of Boccignone, and for some reason, in critical corners out of 2, he just found himself dropping back, failing to get the good exit. There's a few spots like that where you really got to focus on backing the corner up and getting the launch out, especially with all these bumps. Being able to square off the exit, Devin, will give you so much speed down the straights, and that's how you're going to make the passes here, is managing to get those exits where your opponent does not.
And even though it is a sprint race, it certainly is to be mentioned that when you have an open setup, the tires will wear a little bit, but it's still so important to have a setup where at 25 minutes through this race, you can still cut those corners the way that you need to make up that speed.
Yeah, and you can cut them in certain places. Like here, you really don't want to cut. We're on board with Fulton. You can see how tall those curbs are because it goes right up to the grass. They have to go over the actual concrete curbs, so they really can't make them shallow. If you hit those, these cars tend to porpoise. They bounce on the front, and that's the last thing you want through these tight turns.
BJ Fulton right now 4th, in GT4. The 33-year-old astrophysicist still looking for that first victory of the year, but he has been in the hunt almost every single race, fighting here in the top 5, has a handful of podiums as well. Looking back ahead now to RSR, Connor Bloom under attack from Michael Oates here for the 2nd position.
Yeah, Bloom had to go defensive down into 7. Oh, but he messes up the next turn. And oh, they come together, and he's going to clip him into the wall. Oast, unfortunately, going to take heavy damage, smacking straight into the concrete.
Having trouble getting that RSR back into it, and that's a spot that you need to be careful and make sure that there's no drivers coming across the course. That one is devastating. We'll take a look back here on your GSRC replay machine. Where does this go wrong, Joe?
I think I put this one a little bit on Bloom. He tried to come across when clearly Ost was to his inside. He made the mistake. Ost had an opening, and there's nothing you could do. You can't shut the door because he's already got through, and he's fully alongside you. It looks like Ost, as we come back live, is coming to the pits to take his spare car. So I think Bloom just needed to be a little bit more heads up and give him more space there.
Michael Ost, usually running in GT4, has been pretty successful this year, running in RSR this year, but unfortunately for him, moving back. Also problems, or excuse me, Matt Halder here. It seems like he changed out the paint every now and again, and I sometimes forget exactly where he is, but right now trying to fight for a podium position.
You talked about not having to pay for the damage on the cars. You also don't have to pay for the paint, so they can swap them out as much as they want out here. So that's why we're seeing drivers able to really switch around so quickly. Hollander is really trying to put the screws to Michael Johnson here. I think he's going to have a good opportunity. Again, that's that word you're going to hate me for after this broadcast is patience, patience, patience. When it opens up, you got to dive the car in and take it. But until you get that opening, you can't try and make it. Oh, and there you go. He just overcooked it into turn 11, and that's one of those trouble corners around this track.
Well, that might just be why that car, it looks like some suspension damage as well. Hollander has to bring it in and get himself a fast repair as well. Was on vacation 2 weeks ago, and now this race will go up in flames as well. And you can see a little bit off kilter there, that RSR is. Not typically how you like to drive them. Now up to position number 3, Doug Boccignone trying to hold on to a podium position. BJ Fulton still trying to make chase those. We're 8 minutes through here at Belle Isle.
We were watching them earlier on, but I was also keeping an eye on Robin and Edwards. I think Edwards just got this spot a couple corners ago. Robin, with some sort of mistake, was very slow, and Edwards just sniped his way through. And now poor Michael Robin is basically stuck behind him. Again, making those mistakes are costly. Even if you don't hit anything, you find yourself stuck behind a slower car, and then you have the unenvious task of trying to make an overtake around here.
And it's fun seeing how different some of these drivers are. You look at Robin, he's the owner of the MS Media Consulting Incorporated, a media finance and consulting company with clients all over the place, but got his license to race Porsches back in 2016 with his spec Boxer. And so it's fun to see where some of these drivers come from, some of their roots, but hey, all of them just want to come out, run some Porsches, and now out here doing it in the virtual world as well.
A little bit of a mistake through the S's. It looks so simple because it's kind of these long sweeping corners, but because you've got one of the few places with elevation change coming off of them, it's very easy to lose time or even smack the wall out of there. But Robin's made it up very quickly through 3 and 4. He's suddenly right on the rear spoiler, but he's got our leader in the GTEs already on the back of him.
This is Teddy Framheim here, and while the leader coming up to you is usually a big deal, it's another about 11.5 seconds before you get another GTE. A little close there with Aaron Edwards, but Framheim will go through unscathed, try to move around, and still more cars coming up from behind here with this battle with Aaron Edwards and Michael Robin. That right there is Michael Bolton, who suffered an issue earlier. That is a lap down RSR, so that was actually for an overall position there.
And Michael doing a great job taking advantage. You could see that Aaron was distracted with Framheim coming through. So with him on his back foot, he just slipped on by. So Edwards is going to let Bolton through now, and that costs him even more time. Those are the sort of opportunities that a wily driver will kind of be looking for and use to his advantage to try and get the pass done. But that was also a great example of what I was talking about earlier, that Edwards wasn't really watching in the mirror much, and suddenly Framheim had to get on the brakes in a portion of the track that's flat out, and that is going to be costly for time.
Now moving up to position number 3, this battle for the final podium spot is still going. Doug Boccignone and BJ Fulton still duking it out here.
BJ's going to get a little bit frustrated because he's been stuck behind him for about a third of the race now, and he's clearly got good pace because he's been right up on him all the time. So as they come off of 6, this is that important corner, getting the exit, getting the power down without any wheel spin to really give yourself a good launch. But the problem is this braking zone into turn 7 is very crooked. You can see that it's almost blind coming around that corner. and it's hard to make the pass stick through there. But now they've got Framheim. Oh, and Teddy's at a horrible place to try and overtake them.
So Framheim already coming into the top 3 here in GT4. He goes to the inside there of Fulton. Now sets his sights on Boccionione, who pulls over and now trying to make a move. Trying to come around the outside, but that left side has nothing there for BJ Fulton. And back to the chase again he goes.
Fantastic heads up from Doug. He picked the right-hand side and made Teddy go around the outside. That prevented BJ being able to use that to try and get underneath him at the apex and effect an overtake there. So again, great multi-class senses from the 581.
And Boccionione, he just started sim racing back in April of this year, but he's been racing with the POC since 2011. So it just goes to show you how real-world racing experience can help someone out just kind of jumping into the sim racing world and still holding off BJ Fulton for now trying to tuck in behind Michael Bolton.
That was a good spot to get caught by Michael, because on the straightaway down to 3, you can stay pretty predictable, and he was able to easily breeze by. So let's see what BJ can do out of 6 this time. There's a little bit of a crest on the entry into the corner because of this bridge that they go over, and that makes it really tough to get the car to turn in. And this car already, the Cayman, it understeers like crazy. So it's just a frustrating corner all around.
Boccionione began his sim racing career back in April. BJ Fulton began his in May. Now both of them trying to pick up a podium here at the virtual Grand Prix of Detroit as Fulton narrowly avoids contact with the wall there. Still 17 minutes remaining here in this 30-minute sprint, though. Plenty of time for every driver to still pick up some spots.
We've only lost 2 drivers, incredibly, Stout and Schulem. Everybody else is still out there, so that's good to see that people are going to at least keep at it.
And you guys are missing nothing out front. Framheim's lead is now 14.5 seconds. You see Connor Bloom. This is the second place position overall. He is 14.5 seconds behind Framheim.
Oh!
And Boccionione makes contact with the wall, and here comes Fulton.
He's to the inside. How much damage, though, does Doug have on the left-hand side of that car? He really scraped along the front stretch there. And, yeah, easy pass for BJ. And I think Doug is limping a little bit.
That does not seem to have the same speed as Fulton. Corey Lavala is now behind him, closing in for the 4th position.
It's an easy mistake to make. Basically, he was trying to be polite to Bloom coming through, but that's a fairly fast corner. And while you can take it flat out somewhat easily in the GT4s, you can't really be too far offline, and Doug was too far offline. Basically tried to get out of it, but it was too late. He's in the marbles, and it put a big old stripe down the left-hand side of that car.
So Abrams, your GT4 leader right now, he has accumulated a 2-second advantage over Paul Newton. It is 10 more seconds before you find BJ Fulton back here with Doug Boccionione.
Yeah, those top 2 are just in a different world right now. Abrams, no surprise there. Newton's trying his darndest to keep up with him, about 3.5 seconds. Again, I think the traffic will probably play a part in things. It all depends on where they catch it, or we couldn't quite see it up ahead, but man, Bloom actually just made contact with Cicero, the number 23 car, coming through turn 1, and that was right in front of Abrams. If that had resulted in a wreck, Abrams had at least have had to slow up. We're going to watch the replay of it here. If not, potentially, he could have gotten caught up in the wreck himself.
So here's Bloom going around your GT4 leader, Jacob Abrams, catches up, and that one's tight.
Just a glancing blow, thankfully. Yeah, excuse me, it might not show as well on screen, but these GTE cars are a lot faster, and the approaching rate is just phenomenal. So that's why you're seeing these GT4 drivers get caught out like that, because it might seem silly, but it's just a case of you might not be looking in the mirror at quite the right time, and suddenly they're just right there.
16 minutes to go, 14 remaining, or 15 minutes, 16 down, 14 to go. And Aaron Edwards, who was running near the top 5, running into some issues now, and John Momeyer starting to catch up to him.
I think it was turn 2. Now, what's interesting, okay, he doesn't hit the wall. So it's a bit of a Corvette corner moment. Those who are fans of IndyCar might remember the pace car actually spinning out in a similar fashion. Thankfully, did not hit the wall, but he's got to do an Austin Powers to get it facing forward.
Yeah, and this takes a while here, loses a ton of time, and now goes back to 8th place in class. He was running way up front with the pack, trying to lock in a top 5, but now he has to fight his way back up through the field. Now looking at the 4th place position here, Doug Boccignone still trying to hold off Lavala, but still that number 22 Cayman catching up as you now see more RSR traffic trying to ride around.
O's able to get by, but again, Doug is unfortunately a little bit injured, and he's not going to be able to keep him back, I don't think. Great defense there. I thought that Corey would be able to sneak through. I almost think that it might be in the best interest of Doug to duck in and get his spare car, because if he's lacking this much pace, Freckleton's not too far behind, Robin's pretty close, and so I think he might fall to 8th, because Aaron Edwards is the next one after that who's got a big gap and shouldn't be able to catch him.
Yeah, Boccignone, since contact with the wall, has lost 6.5 seconds to BJ Fulton. That's where he was battling. That's only been about 2 or 3 laps, so definitely off the pace, trying to hold on there, and it's kind of hard to tell. It doesn't look like he has a ton of physical looking damage, but you never know. Sometimes the suspension, just a little bit there, one wheel being pointed with a little bit too much camber, that can completely ruin all your straightaway speed at a track that has a lot of long straights.
Well, and also with walls very close, if your handling is messed up because of the suspension, that makes it incredibly precarious, because you're having to make adjustments on the fly, and it seems like he has fairly well, and he's given himself enough of a buffer that he's not risking hitting the wall again. But again, that's very difficult to do. You just don't know how the car is going to handle after you first hit until you get to that next corner.
Well, so far, just about everyone is separated by a decent margin between these, besides these two right here. Your lead in RSR is nearly 22nd. Abrams' lead not quite as comfortable, about 4 seconds though still. But everyone's still kind of getting away from one another unless it's lap traffic. But this right now is the closest battle on track.
Eat my own words. Doug's doing a good job of holding Corey behind. I thought this would be a lot easier for him. And maybe it'll come down to what I was mentioning before, where he needs to set up the exit of one of these corners onto, say, the backstretch here, the long straights that you were talking about. And that'll just give him a chance to try and outbrake him, because if Doug's having trouble running the car to its maximum, I think he's about 2 seconds off of his normal pace, it appears, then it should be easy to snap up the spot.
Still trying to make chase. This is for 4th in GT4. It's 11th overall. And in the real world, you have potentially mechanical failures or technological issues. In the sim racing world, though, with, say, Corey Lavala right now, he's having some netcode, internet connection issues, and those, just like a mechanical issue, can take you out of a race or can also affect other drivers' races as well. As trying to get around lap traffic, trying to give him as much room as he can, scraping the wall there. But if you're Boccignone, you have this trouble sometimes where a car is netcoding behind you, maybe trying to make a move, and when that car disappears, you have no idea where in the world that car's going to bounce back up on the track. If you've watched Wreck-It Ralph before, it's just called a glitching. You don't know what's going to happen next.
That's a good way to put it. I was going to say, yeah, this is one of the few things where there really isn't a good comparison in real life racing, because yes, the mechanical or electrical problems are a good way to talk about it in terms of the car DNFing. But when trying to pass someone, there may be a blind spot, but even that's not quite the same thing. You literally just don't know where the car is going to reappear, and that's unfortunately the reality of racing over the internet. Thankfully, doesn't happen all that often, with most people having decent internet connections. And I think it's sorting itself out. Corey looks like he hasn't blinked in a moment.
So it looks like it's starting to clean up a little bit for Corey. And as the driver who's blinking out, it's scary too, because when everyone else leaves and you don't know where they're going when you come back on the track either, it's just not good for anyone. You really can't use it quite as an advantage. Still, everyone right now pretty separated out. Lavalette still trying to find a way to catch up to that rear bumper. Boccignoni, though, still able to hold on to that 4th place position.
Corey is experiencing something that is comparable to real life because it happens in real life, and that is basically suddenly matching the speed of the car ahead. You get stuck behind someone, and that adjusts your braking points, and now suddenly you're driving just like them. You have to drive differently to make something happen, and there he does right there, sending it in deep into one. Woo! Brave, but good stuff, and Corey finally makes it work.
And this is just before you already see Teddy Framheim reeling up on these drivers. And Boccignoni stayed there, I think, a couple seconds too long. Framheim gets around everyone, though. Another battle on track. It looks like Jerry Freckleton holding off Michael Robon right now. A little bit further back, but these drivers have been duking it out for a little bit.
Mike's been working on this for quite a while. He had fallen backwards, and it definitely has better pace than Freckleton. Now that he's here, let's see if he can do a little bit differently than Corey. Again, sometimes you don't want to get stuck behind that driver for too long, and you got to be decisive and make a move quick before you find yourself almost hypnotized by their pace.
Robon trying to catch up. You're watching off the top of Jerry Freckleton's Cayman. About 7 minutes to go here, and Freckleton speeds up a little bit. Contact, and they both go around.
Oh, that looked like it was going to be a clean pass, too, unfortunately, and just all kind of fell apart at the last second. Not sure that that was really anybody's fault. Let's watch on the replay here. Oh, yeah, kind of a racing deal. It looks like maybe Freckleton was trying to come back across, but the presentation was sort of there. He got a better exit, and I think maybe it was just so sudden that the car was there and Freckleton didn't realize it, and, well, they both paid the price, sadly.
And while that was going on, Michael Ost and RSR took away the 5th position from Bayan Salehi. So Ost coming out in the RSRs, usually running in GT4, now in the top 5 position here.
Let's take a look at the replay on that. There we go. Salehi defending to the inside. Oh, wow! And nearly gets into the side of him. Credit to Ost, keeping that from becoming an accident, but also credit because that was an absolute perfect example of the over-under, the switchback, where you use the better exit speed to overtake the driver down the straightaway. Is that Cicero into the wall? Yeah, that was Dominic in the 23, unfortunately, finding the left-hand side wall.
That was tight. And actually, you could see on Bayan Salehi still some issues here for Cicero. But on Bayan Salehi's rear spoiler, you can see some damage where the right side hangs down. You saw that a little bit ago. At a track like this, Joe, how does that affect the car? I guess when it comes to the Porsches, that's kind of like generic damage. If the rear end gets hit, then you can see on the left side of your screen right there, the wing gets kind of bent in. They all do the same way, but what does that do to the car itself?
It will mess with the rear end grip a little bit. We can't always tell exactly what the damage is because, again, the limitations of racing over the internet, it's showing us iRacing's interpretation of the damage. Now, that could mean something more than just wing damage. It could mean something, with the suspension as well. If it is wing damage, the car probably is going to be a little bit looser, and especially on certain corners, especially if it's on the right-hand side, it'll affect left-hand turns more than the right-hand turns because you've lost downforce on the right-hand side, and you want the grip on the right-hand side on those left-handers.
Well, we haven't been able to talk about these two drivers very much because they're about to get win number 9 if everything just doesn't go awry. Teddy Framheim now a 24-second lead over Connor Bloom. Jacob Abrams' lead has now eclipsed 6 seconds. So not quite as dominating as his RSR counterpart, but nonetheless, once again, these two drivers putting on absolute clinics.
But the thing about Detroit is that you can't take it for granted. Yes, he's got a 6-second lead, but Abrams can easily get caught up in an accident. We've seen that. We've seen miscommunication between the classes or drivers wrecking in front of you. Framheim, mildly safer. 23 seconds means that he can have a spin or he can tap the wall and he can lose some of that time, but he can't have an almighty, smash into the barriers and completely total the car. He doesn't have that much time.
And when it comes to these drivers, a couple of constants when we talk to these drivers post races. One, the amount of practice time that they put in is an incredible amount. But number two is also knowing what these Porsches need setup-wise. And those are two things that these drivers are extremely knowledgeable about, it seems like.
I wish I had some of that knowledge, to be honest. Setups were never my forte, and I'm always envious of those who can manage to figure out the science of how to get it to go that little bit faster or handle the way that they want. Framheim certainly seems to have sussed that out. And I wonder if maybe that's part of what his speed is compared to everybody else, because this GTE car is a lot more technical and there's a lot more that you can do than the GT4, because the GT4 is essentially kind of a club level car. It's a lower level machine. It's a little bit simpler. It's not made to have a team of like 12 engineers to set it up for you. Whereas the GTE cars, that's basically they're literally the GTLMs that you see in IMSA. So those are factory teams that have tons of scientists that are able to try and tweak them to the nth degree.
Abrams right now under attack from a couple of RSRs. Coming up soon will be the second place RSR in the Pink Pig. That's Connor Bloom, not too far behind. So these drivers continue to navigate through traffic, either coming up from behind or looking out ahead of them. But still, we haven't had a ton of issues as Connor Bloom about loses the rear end off the corner, but able to keep it straight. But still, so far at least, a minute 30 to go, have not seen one of those giant blockages on this track.
Yeah, at this point, you're less likely to get them. You still can get a car in an awkward position, especially if they wind up prone, essentially perpendicular to the racing line. And the worst spots for that is basically from 3 to 6, where you've, whoa, and who was that smacking the wall there in front of our leader?
I believe that might have been Michael Roban there.
Yeah, you're right.
Into the wall. There's a couple of turquoise and black ones, but the ones with Octavio Tequila on them are the best, it seems like.
Well, thankfully, it seems Framheim will be able to maybe get a shot of that pretty soon, because we just had the white flag.
So one more time around here for Teddy Framheim. His lead now past 26 seconds. Meanwhile, Jacob Abrams, his lead has accumulated to over 7.5 seconds himself. And it has certainly been the story of these two drivers absolutely dominating the Porsche Owners Club Sim Racing League here in season number 2.
Just been awesome to watch. It's taking it right out to the edge of things. And that 106 is, I feel like if I was some of the other drivers, I probably would be saving this replay and watching his line and seeing how he does it. Maybe not there, as he almost throws it away on the final lap.
A little bit tight, but these guys close to the wall again there. They do drivers clinics. They help out. They do coaching videos and stuff. So I think that he's typically pretty willing to share, and that's something fun about this league, is that they get to kind of communicate, cooperate, and collaborate with one another on setups and learning how to drive these cars better. And hopefully we'll do the same when they take them out and play with them in the real world as well. But for now, Teddy Framheim, win number 9 coming up on the season. The 34-year-old engineer at Apple wins at Detroit.
It's like Jacob Abrams is staying pretty safe. He doesn't really have much traffic around him, and he's still got 8 seconds over Paul Newton. Barring disaster in these last few corners, he's got it wrapped up.
Jacob Abrams so successful in the first half of the year, and then in half number 2 was just absolutely hounded by bad luck and lap cars and just clipping the grass, taking away wins. Well, now he will also take home win number 9. In GT4, Jacob Abrams has definitely been the class of the field, and now he will look to claim a championship next week at Circuit of the Americas. Jacob Abrams will take the win at Detroit in GT4.
Great stuff from him. Paul Newton has got to wonder what has he got to do to take the fight to Jacob Abrams, especially for next season. This one's probably over, bar the shouting. So Paul's probably thinking forward at this point.
Well, we will take a quick break, bring it on back for your entire finishing order, and along with that, we'll talk to your podium drivers in both classes. Stick around here on GSRC. Well, patience was the name of the game, and in fact, I think that we actually saw quite a bit of patience here at Belle Isle at the Detroit Grand Prix track. Teddy Framheim, he puts on another absolute clinic, winning this race by nearly 30 seconds. Connor Bloom brings it home in second, Michael Johnson in third. Matt Hollander brings it home in fourth after taking the week off a couple weeks ago. Michael Ost, usually in GT4, gets a top 5 here in RSR. Bayan Salehi rounds out in 6th, Michael Bolton in 7th. Jacob Abrams takes the win in GT4 with Paul Newton coming in 2nd. BJ Fulton rounds out your top 3 in GT4 and also the overall top 10.
Corey Latvala finishes in 4th in class with Doug Baccignone in P5. With Michael Roban, a late race hit to the wall, doesn't slow him down too much, and he'll manage a 6th position. Aaron Edwards, unfortunately, falling down to 7th. And John Momeyer in P8. Jad Duncan with a 9th was ahead of Mark Rondeau, rounding out your top 10 in class. Jerry Freckleton unfortunately involved in an incident himself. Could have been higher up, but he's 18th overall. Ron Palmer with an early accident set him a lap down from everybody. And Dominic Cicero DNF today. Everybody else behind him, unfortunately, did not see the checkered flag.
That will include Adam Fulton, Robert Stout, Jeffrey Shulam, but the name that we actually, we weren't really able to talk about his name very often because there was just no one around him. Teddy Framheim takes home the victory, and Teddy, man, I tell you what, we talked about in this race how technical these cars are, but when it comes to trying to tune up these cars to run just a blistering pace like you do, how much time do you spend on these setups here? Because however much time it is, it certainly shows on the racetrack.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I was surrounded by GT4s the whole time, by the way. It didn't feel lonely to me. Probably the first couple of hours I spend typically adapting some existing setup that I have. In this case, I drew from a Sebring setup from the past because I don't know a whole lot about spring rates and damper tuning. I figured start there, have a solid baseline for a car that will handle bumps well, and then tweak it because this is ultimately a lower speed course, so a bit more aero, a bit more front end just to give the car some bite. I guess that's a long answer. The short answer is a couple of hours for each race.
Well, I like both answers, in fact. But when it comes down, you talk about how you're around so many GT4s, and it's because of that pace that you get. And on a track like this, it is lower speed, but it's so tight. It's basically like a Roval infield all the way around. How was it trying to navigate through that lap traffic for? I mean, it was really over 20 minutes of the race. You're trying to navigate through other Caymans.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the same as it's been. I'm in a position now in both the championship and ideally at the start of a race where like I build up a gap and it's on other people to take risks and try to catch me. I can be a bit more conservative and not take those same kinds of risks. Only pass when I know I can pretty much get by, even if the other GT4 does something completely unexpected. So that's been my approach, and especially here, there is no exit strategy if the GT4 does something that you don't expect. There's nowhere to go. So it was basically zero risk the entire time.
And bringing home the trophy at the end of the day, Teddy, who do you have to thank for being atop the podium once again here at Detroit?
Thank you, as always, to you guys at GSRC for broadcasting these. Thank you to Matt Hollander and the POC for putting them on, and my family for watching. Thank you this time as well to BR Racing, actually, for supporting me in my real-life Spec Boxster voyage going into next year. Hopefully, I'll be able to talk more about that soon.
Yeah, that will certainly be fun to watch. But of course, we can't wait to see you in 2 weeks at Circuit of the Americas, where Teddy Framheim will wrap up a championship. Now we'll hand on over. Jacob Abrams is alongside Joe Peak.
Well, Jacob, you managed another win and you had a handy gap over Paul Newton, but that wasn't the case in the early part where we saw you go defensive a few times. Were you feeling pretty safe though, considering how hard it is to pass here?
Yeah, I knew that if I could at least build a gap, get them outside of a second by the time the RSRs showed up, I would probably be in pretty good shape. But yeah, and then sort of the first couple laps, it was really just parking the car on the right part of the track, and it's pretty tough to overtake here. So as long as I didn't lose too much momentum going through a corner, and I could defend pretty aggressively and not have to worry about getting past.
We heard Teddy talking about no escape routes around here, and you obviously had a few instances where there's some wrecks and certain scary moments. How do you keep those from rattling you, especially when you're leading the race and you know that could throw it away?
Well, I guess when I saw a yellow flag or a spun car or something, I knew was worth slowing down as much as I needed to play it safe. But then as soon as you pass it, it's sort of it's mentally and in the back of your mind, and you just kind of focus on putting the hammer down and putting as quick a lap together as possible for the rest of the lap and into the next lap to make up the lost time. And just I was kind of in a groove from lap 2 or 3 on once the tires got heated up, so I was just hitting my marks and doing my thing, and as long as I could get some clean air, I was able to put some quick laps in.
Well, more race to go for the season. Can you make it 10?
Yeah, I think so. I feel good about it.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you when we go to COTA. And again, congratulations on victory.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
It's Jacob Abrams and Devin. I believe you've caught up with Michael Johnson.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, hey, Michael. Welcome back on top of the podium again, finishing in 3rd place. And this track, pretty thin here and there, but how that Octavio Tequila RSR, managed to get through all that traffic?
With a whole lot of luck and some fine distilling process. Oh, wait, no, that's the tequila. That's the distilling process. But yeah, a lot of luck. I had one incident on lap, I think 16 or 17, where I was coming up on a GT4 car and I had to lock him up because he almost put me in the wall. And Matt was closing quick. Matt had a target on my back. He knew he was coming for me, and I had to really manage that traffic as good as I ever have in my life. So it was challenging.
Yeah, only holding off Matt by 1 second there at the line to come across. But obviously, this has been a long season. In 2 weeks, coming to Circuit of the Americas, it will be 16 races over 32 weeks. How has week 1 of season 2 been different than what you have learned throughout the season than coming here to Detroit? What has changed for you through those 15 races, 30 weeks?
Well, I haven't been here the whole time. I came in kind of about I don't know, a third of the way through or so. But I had to take some time to learn how the different drivers drive and figure out what to expect from them. Like Connor, I know, Greg, I know. We saw some of the pros who come in. I know them. I race with them all the time, and I understand what they're going to do. But let's say, for example, Matt's a very fast driver, and I've got to figure out how he's going to attack. I know how Connor will attack. I don't know how Matt will attack because I haven't had a couple of dozen or a couple hundred, however many races with him.
And you almost got to know a little bit more how Matt would attack there. Just about another lap would have done that for you. But
Well, yeah,
Michael,
if you remember a couple of weeks ago when we were at what was it, the Auto Club Speedway, our finish 1-2 was less than a tenth. So yeah, he's very good at attacking.
And that was a fun one to call, a fun one to watch. And it's been a fun season being able to watch you guys adapt everyone. But who do you have to thank being on the podium once again here?
Well, of course, there's Octavio Tequila, Dr. Sanjay Mehta. He's one of my big clients that I work with out at COTA quite a bit. Ben Bettenhausen, another one of my clients out of New York City, and his company, P2 Print. So those guys, of course, big thank you to keeping a roof over my head and food in my belly.
Two of my favorite things in the world. Well, Michael, congratulations on a third place finish, and hopefully we'll see you here in a couple of weeks at the season finale.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Michael Johnson, your third place finisher overall and an RSR. And now we'll hand it back over to Joe Peak. He's with Paul Newton.
Paul with a second place today, unfortunately needing inroads on the points with Jacob Abrams, but not finding it. Paul, early on, it looked like you had a few attacks on Jacob, but nothing really stuck. Did you know at the time that you kind of needed it, that he would be able to pull away later in the race?
I figured as close to him as I was, he was probably saving a little bit, and I think that made the difference today. I was really going as fast as I could. I was doing qualifying laps all the time behind him, and just kind of ate up the tires and allowed him to drive away.
It looked like once the traffic came through, that really hurt you in terms of staying on the back of that Porsche. Would you feel that's the case? Is there anything you feel like you would have done differently with the traffic?
I think I handled the traffic about as well as I could have. I think it just happened to be the same time my tires started to go off, so I think the GTE traffic wasn't really a big part of what happened today.
Well, you've got one more race to try and stop Jacob from getting 10 wins on the season. Do you have anything special at COTA?
I think I'll either win or crash at COTA. I'm going to do something a little different.
All right. Well, I like the sound of that. Paul Newton with a second place finish here, Devin. And I believe we've got a quick interview with a driver who had a lot of good fighting today, BJ Fulton.
Yeah, BJ having to come through a few drivers there, a few battles. Take me through exactly where the heart rate was in this race.
Well, it was quite high for that first part of the race, chasing Doug. I was just watching some of the footage from Doug's gearbox, and I was on him that whole time. I felt like he was slowing me down a little bit, and it was a bit of a shame because I may have had a chance to chase Paul there for a while, but I just didn't want to do anything risky, you know?
Yeah, and that was a tough one there, a close battle, a clean battle as well, but obviously it's been a long season through 15 races now, going to 16, but how have you kind of seen this league evolve here throughout the season here in a very long season too?
It's been quite a roller coaster. I mean, at first it was all of us were just, you know, on COVID lockdown and none of us could get out and race and do the real thing. You know, now some of us are starting to get back into it, but a lot of us have just stuck with this sim league, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's fun to watch you guys who have some real world experience driving Porsches and racing them wheel to wheel and taking them into the sim world. But congratulations on another top three. Who do you have to thank for another great performance?
Oh yeah, well, first of all, you know, my friends and family who are all watching it, and my wife, of course, for letting me spend so much time in the simulator to be able to pick up this new hobby and get to where I am so quickly.
Well, BJ, congratulations on a third place finish. Hope to see you in a couple of weeks for the season finale.
I'll be there. Thanks. See you then.
Well, Joe, another fun one here. Now this one at Detroit coming up next, the Circuit of the Americas, and I think we're kind of looking forward to how interesting that will be. Obviously, a world-famous track, and taking these Porsches to it, that will be a little bit fun here for the season finale.
No doubt about that. And it's going to be complete opposite to this one because there's a lot of wide open space at that track. So I think the fights will be pretty fierce.
Absolutely. Well, we have to thank you here for another great race here for the Porsche Owners Club. Joe, can you take this one away for me, please? Got some technical difficulties.
Sure thing. Well, we want to, of course, thank our sponsors for the series, Sunset Mortgage, as well as Octavio Tequila, and then, of course, Century Financial Consultants. The organizers, thanks to the Porsche Owners Club for bringing us back for another season of coverage. And we also want to thank the companies that provide the software and hardware for our broadcasts that are listed here on your screen. Additional thanks go to June Lalonde, who provides our wonderful music. There's her contact on the screen as well if you want to go get some more of her music. If I could speak tonight, thanks to the team today, my cohort Devin and Sean, as well as Dougie. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, including upcoming races, you can find it at globalsimracingchannel.com. We've got our social media outlets, which includes Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook on Global Sim Racing Channel, and Instagram at GSRC_Graham. If you'd like to support us, our merchandise store is simply gsrc.storenv.com. A link is in the description below. Make sure and click that so you don't miss a moment here. As well, don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss a moment here on GSRC. The finale is coming up for the Porsche Owners Club Sim Racing League. That'll be December 14th, for 90 minutes at the Circuit of the Americas. But we have upcoming races for other series listed on the screen. Check those out and mark them down on your calendar. Until next time, race clean, race hard. We'll see you on the track.